Before we dive into the depths of history, I want to ask you to do something crucial. Subscribe to the channel and leave a comment sharing what aspect of wartime history fascinates you the most. This guide isn't just about recounting events. It's about understanding how the horrors and lessons of World War II directly shaped the modern fight for human rights, and how this knowledge can give both historians and survivalists a sharper lens for analyzing the world today. How the atrocities of World War II exposed the urgent need for global human rights protections. World War II wasn't just a conflict between armies, it was a confrontation with the darkest aspects of human behavior. The systematic persecution of Jews, Romani people, disabled individuals, political dissidents, and countless civilians under Nazi rule, combined with brutal acts committed by other regimes, forced the world to confront a simple, unsettling truth. There were no international safeguards strong enough to protect individuals from mass atrocities. Newsreels and survivor testimonies revealed unimaginable cruelty, and the world could not unsee it. From the liberation of Auschwitz to the revelations at Belsen and Dachau, millions witnessed firsthand the consequences of unchecked power. These images and reports didn't just shock the global conscience, they became the catalysts for legal and moral action. Understanding this helps anyone studying human conflict recognize patterns of oppression early, and it provides survivalists with historical context on why international law evolved to protect civilians during crises. How wartime diplomacy laid the foundation for the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Even before the war ended, Allied leaders were acutely aware that preventing future atrocities required more than victory on the battlefield. The Atlantic Charter, signed by Roosevelt and Churchill in 1941, explicitly included the right of all people to self-determination and economic security. By 1945, as delegates gathered for the United Nations Conference on International Organization in San Francisco, the idea of codifying basic human rights had transitioned from moral imperative to diplomatic necessity. It wasn't abstract idealism, it was a practical blueprint designed to prevent nations from repeating the horrors just witnessed. For history enthusiasts, this reveals how policy and survival intersect. In times of systemic crisis, the rules that protect ordinary people are often drafted in the aftermath of extreme failure, not before it. For modern applications, studying these diplomatic maneuvers equips one to anticipate how global crises today, refugee migrations, civil conflicts, or authoritarian crackdowns, might prompt the rapid establishment of protective frameworks. How the Nuremberg Trials turned the concept of justice into a global standard. The Nuremberg Trials, initiated in 1945, were unprecedented. For the first time, world leaders held individuals accountable, not just for political acts, but for crimes against humanity. These trials established that following orders was not an acceptable defense for atrocities. Beyond their legal significance, they demonstrated that the international community could unify around moral imperatives, setting a precedent that continues to shape international criminal law to this day. Survivalists and historians alike can extract lessons here. Understanding legal accountability isn't merely theoretical. Recognizing the mechanisms through which the global community enforces norms can guide strategic planning during political upheaval or occupation scenarios, from knowing what protections exist for civilians to understanding when intervention may be justified by international law. The experiences of displaced populations have, profoundly shaped modern refugee rights. World War II produced the largest population displacements in human history at that point. Millions were forced to flee their homes, leaving behind everything familiar. In response, the United Nations established the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees in 1950, and the 1951 Refugee Convention codified legal protections for those fleeing persecution. This shift wasn't simply administrative, it reflected a global acknowledgement that human rights must extend beyond borders. For historians, tracing these movements offers insight into how mass displacement shapes societies, economies, and political systems. For survivalists, the lesson is equally practical. Understanding migration patterns and international protections can inform safe routes, resettlement strategies, or even contingency planning in regions affected by conflict today. While international law was taking shape, ordinary citizens and resistance movements were, in their own way, shaping the narrative of human rights. Networks that helped Jews escape occupied Europe, underground presses that exposed atrocities, and citizen documentation of war crimes all contributed to a growing global consciousness. These efforts illustrate a critical principle. Systemic change often begins with localized, courageous action. Studying these movements offers survivalists a model for organizing, documenting, and communicating in situations where centralized support is absent. From establishing clandestine communication channels to protecting vulnerable populations, the strategies employed by wartime activists provide real-world templates for resilience in extreme conditions. World War II teaches us that human rights are not static. They evolve in response to crises. For those studying history, this underscores the importance of context. Laws, treaties, and ethical norms are often reactions to catastrophe. For survivalists, the lesson is actionable. Awareness of these historical precedents can guide decisions when navigating conflict zones or oppressive regimes. Understanding the interplay between law, morality, and human behavior equips one to anticipate threats, identify safe havens, and leverage international protections when conventional authority fails. Whether you are analyzing historical patterns or planning modern survival strategies, this perspective transforms abstract principles into tangible tools. The fight for human rights that emerged after World War II was not an inevitable development. It was forged in fire, shaped by evidence, diplomacy, trial, and grassroots courage. Studying this period gives historians and survivalists alike a dual advantage, a nuanced understanding of global legal evolution, and a practical awareness of how societies respond under extreme duress. This knowledge is not merely academic. It empowers critical thinking in crisis scenarios, informs ethical decision-making, and provides a framework for evaluating the morality of choices in situations where survival and justice intersect. In conclusion, the global fight for human rights was born from the devastation of World War II. It was a response to atrocities that demanded accountability, structured protections, and a recognition of the inherent dignity of every person. By examining the diplomatic, legal, and grassroots efforts that followed the war, we gain not only a clearer picture of history but also practical tools for understanding and responding to crises today. If this guide has deepened your appreciation for World War II's lasting impact on human rights, make sure to subscribe, comment with your thoughts, and share this video with fellow enthusiasts. Engaging with this history equips you not just with knowledge, but with the strategic and moral insight necessary for navigating the complex world we live in.